Hey everybody, I am Strength Coach Claire and welcome to my YouTube channel. So I am a UK-based strength coach. I work with clients both in person and online. Primarily my client base consists of women who are in their late 30s through to their late 50s who want to build strength. Some of them compete in powerlifting, some of them don't, but all of them are looking to build strength to ensure they retain their independence and resilience as they transition through midlife and beyond. I myself am also a competitive powerlifter here in the UK, and I recently competed for the first time in 2.5 years, and I wanted to create a little video going into a bit more detail about my prep for the competition, how that went, my nutrition, strategies, all that good stuff, and then obviously talk through the day, my attempt selection, my feelings about the day, and so on. Let's jump straight into it. So this was an interesting competition for me because obviously it's 2.5 years since I last did one, but it's also the first time that I have been self-coached through a competition, apart from way back when I was a beginner and didn't really know what I was doing. Ever since then, I have worked with a coach. Last year, I really decided that I wanted to level up in my own coaching and become the kind of coach that an athlete like me would hire. And by an athlete like me, I mean somebody who has been doing the sport a long time and really wants to compete at least at national level. You know, they've gone through the beginner games phase and they need something that is a little bit more specialist. So I did a lot of training over the last few years, really, just to upskill myself up to the point where I felt that I was able to coach myself, and that is what I've been doing. I've been using myself as a little bit of a guinea pig. Prep for this competition really started, I would say, about 10 weeks ago, and I sort of ran 2 prep blocks. One was a 4-week block, then I actually had a week holiday back in the beginning of February. I went snowboarding for a week, and then I came back and ran a 5-week block into the competition. Prior to those 2 blocks, I was sort of just running development blocks, just trying to build general strength, working on like triples, 5s, things like that. Just really trying to build strength across the board on the big 3. And at that point, everything was going pretty well. My lifts at the end of last year, my lifts have been progressing really nicely. All 3 really, but particularly the squat and the bench press had been going very well. But shortly before the end of last year, I picked up quite a nasty shoulder injury. And I basically think this was from pretty much going from no bench pressing at all. So at the start of last year, I wasn't doing any powerlifting. I was just purely bodybuilding, machines, dumbbells, all that good stuff. No barbell bench pressing. And then I was like, right, let's get back on a powerlifting program. And I went to benching 3 times a week straight away and then 4 times a week. I also changed my technique. So I was working with a more internally rotated position, like more of a bulldog grip, where my elbows are a bit more flared. Bench press strength absolutely took off like it hasn't for years, but I then picked up this shoulder injury. Obviously the approach there was a little bit awry. I also couldn't deadlift at this time because the shoulder injury was very sensitive to subluxation, so the pulling out of the joint force. So basically for the 2 blocks prior to starting competition prep, I really wasn't doing any benching or deadlifting, and what I was doing is very minimal. So my bench pressing was partial range of motion only, so floor press, pin press, spotto press, very low volume, very easy, like RPE 4 and below. And my deadlifting likewise, just really low volume, really low intensity. So the only lift that I was really able to push at that time was my squat, because actually low bar didn't really bother the injury at all. It was the bench pressing and the deadlifting. Squats were going really, really nicely. And then I started my first comp prep block at the start of the year, so in January. And I started to rehab my shoulder. I was working with a physiotherapist, and I was able to keep it healthy enough at that point that I was somewhat able to push my bench. It wasn't as comprehensive as I had been doing prior when it was progressing really well, but it was better than nothing. So I was kind of in a stage where bench was steadily creeping back up, and I was like, okay, I could probably do something in the competition that's not going to be embarrassing, at least, and deadlift likewise. But at that time, I then developed a little bit of quad tendonitis in my knee. So it sounds as though I'm making a ton of excuses here, but prep actually went really well for this competition. I'm just kind of trying to create a bit of context here. So I got a little bit of quad tendonitis in my knee, and I think this was just because at the time that I was only able to push squats, I really did push squats, and squats were absolutely flying. But essentially in that pre-competition, in that pre-holiday January block, the first of my competition prep blocks, if you like, I really had to pull the volume on my squats on the secondary day in particular, because I needed that day to be easy to allow my knee quad pain to recover well enough to be able to do my primary day. So I was really only squatting properly once a week and doing like a very easy secondary day, and I sort of kept that going all the way up to the competition. So went on holiday for a week, didn't do any lifting whatsoever. And then I came back to my 5-week taper block, peak and taper. So really just properly comp prepping at this point. I really dialed in. For this block, I took inspiration. So I designed it myself, obviously, and I really pulled inspiration from 2 places. First was the last time I did a competition, which was 2.5 years ago. And that competition went quite well. So I was like, okay, I'm going to look at the protocols that I followed then for each lift and roughly replicate those. And the other place that I took inspiration from was what had been working well more recently. So my last few development blocks towards the end of the previous year, whatever I've been doing on squatting recently. And I sort of put those 2 pieces of information together and created this sort of 5-week competition prep block. It went really well. The 5 weeks leading into competition were very good. I had to do a lot of basically bench for the shoulder injury, which is still not perfect, but it's manageable. I have to do a lot of rehab. I have to be very specific about what accessories I do. I have to really manage the intensity on bench. So I'd have like 2 fairly heavy bench days and then 2 very light bench days that were like range of motion limited, or like tempo to really limit the load. And then for squats, again, I just had 1 heavy primary day and a very light secondary day. I started with high box squats to manage the knee pain, because obviously if I'm not going through full range of motion, I don't get as much knee pain. And then I switched it to pause squats later on. Again, just pause, keep it nice and light, and just really dial in the positioning basically to keep the knee pain to a minimum. Before my holiday, the last session before my holiday, I squatted 150 for 2 reps. So squats have been going very well despite the little niggle. 150 for 2 reps in the gym, felt very strong on squats. Then had my week holiday and came back to start my new block, and I think from that point, squats never really recovered. They never really recovered to their previous strength that they had before my holiday. They just sort of stagnated through that whole block. And I think what was going on there was probably I'd pulled the volume a little bit too much. I had to keep that secondary day very light, and I'd also pulled quite a lot of volume off the primary day. Kept the intensity roughly the same, but obviously the RPE was much lower because there's basically fewer reps per set. Obviously I was doing heavy singles. As far as my approach goes, top sets, we are collecting information about whether the program is working. So we're looking for performance in that top set. It's an indicator of how the program is working. It's an indicator of where strength is currently at. It gives exposure to high intensities where you may not get that on your rep work or on your back off work. But it's not really where the strength is built. The strength is built on the back off sets, and I really just slashed the RPE of those back off sets because I was basing it on what I'd been doing in my competition 2.5 years ago. So I think basically my strength just stagnated, probably because I wasn't training hard enough on squats on that primary day. That's my suspicion. Bench and deadlift, I had no complaints whatsoever through prep. Bench in particular really showed up over the last 2 weeks of prep. I'd benched 77.5 a couple of times in the last couple of weeks, and it was moving comfortably, and I was confident that I was going to PB my bench press. So yeah, deadlifts had just sort of ticked along. I don't really push deadlifts that hard in training. You'll rarely see me do singles even close to what I'm going to hit on the platform. I do some heavy singles, but it's not going to be like what I'm aiming for, close to what I'm aiming for on the platform. I don't really feel that I have to train that hard on deadlifts. I can usually count on my deadlifts showing up for me on meet day, touch wood. So I just really followed a very similar protocol to what I did last time with deadlifts, because I kind of knew that had worked and that they were going to come through for me. So that was prep training wise. Nutrition wise, prior to my holiday, I'd not really been doing anything. I was loosely tracking now and again, but for the most part I was just eating what I wanted, and I was sitting like 70.8-ish, so like the high end of the 70 kilos. My weight class is 69, under 69 kilos, so I had a little bit of weight to cut. And honestly, when I got back from holiday, I had a little bit of water retention, but that dropped off straight away, and I was pretty much in the same spot. So I didn't really gain any weight over the holiday, which is surprising because I was pretty much eating nothing but croissants and baguettes for a week. But once I got back from my holiday, I did start working with a nutrition coach. I just decided that I needed the accountability. I'm very used to tracking. I'm very used to knowing what I need to eat. I've worked with nutrition coaches before. I do a little bit of nutrition coaching for my clients as well. So it's one of those things, like, I could have done it myself, but realistically I probably couldn't, because I was so close that I knew I could probably just leave it to the last minute and then do a water cut, but I didn't think that was the best approach. I thought the best approach was just get some accountability, track for a few weeks, and just get your weight sitting under 69. So that is what I did. And the nutrition, the weight cut was very, very straightforward. I got down to below 69 about 3 weeks out. It fluctuated a little bit, and then in the last week before competition, it just dropped. The weight just dropped off me. So yeah, that was kind of the prep. And then meet day comes around. I'm feeling pretty good. I weighed in at 67.8, which is just over a kilo under my weight class. So very comfortably made weight. Warm-ups for squats were kind of feeling the way that I expected, to be honest. I was like, yeah, squats have been feeling heavy. They've been feeling a little bit inconsistent, but they were feeling okay. And I had planned, my original plan for squats was to open on 140, which is actually equal to my previous competition PB. But again, because squat training had been going so well, I'd gained a lot of strength on squats. I was confident that that'd be there. I'd done it for singles in training very recently. I'd done it for a triple like a couple of blocks previously. So I was very happy that 140 was going to move for my opener. Take a jump to 147.5 for my second, and then go for between 152 and 155 for my third, depending on how that 147.5 moved. However, my squat opener moved like absolute trash. Honestly, it's kind of a blur now in hindsight, but I was very, very nervous. So it's 2.5 years since I last competed. Squats had not been feeling good in training. They were just feeling inconsistent. Technique didn't feel dialed in. Obviously, I'd had my recurring knee issue. And obviously, the first squat is the first lift of the competition. I was so nervous for that first squat. It was just an absolute blur. The spotters like being around threw me off. Obviously the audience, the MC really threw me off. It moved, but it didn't move well. But I walked off the platform afterwards and I was like, okay, I know that wasn't a strength issue. That was a nerves issue. That's why we pick an opener that we know we have the strength for, even on a bad day, even when we're nervous. So I was like, I'm not going to push myself for 155. Like, I just don't think that's going to be there today. So I just was like, if I can get 150, I'll be very happy, because that'll be a 10 kilo competition PB. I'll already have collected potentially another 10 kilos on my total as well. So that is what we're going to aim for the third. So my pacing just changed slightly after I walked off stage for that opener, and I went 145 for my second, just to make the obvious logical jump to 150. 145 for my second. By this point, I kind of knew where I was and I'd remembered what I was doing. And 145 moved like an opener. If my opener had moved like that, I would have been much more confident to be a bit more aggressive with my squats. But 145 moved really, really well. The walkout was a bit shaky. I don't know what happened there. But again, it's a weight that I've done recently in training. It's a weight that I have repped before. So I should be confident with 145, and it did move very, very well. So I did feel somewhat justified then in my decision to have opened on 140, because when your open moves badly, you sort of think, did I make a mistake with my tent selection? Was I like way off with that? But 145 moving like it did, it just gave me actually a lot more confidence that 150 was going to be there. So I put 150 in for my third, and it was a good call in the end, because 150 moved as well. And again, it moved better than my opener. It was still a grind. It was still sticky. I've moved 150 faster than that in the gym, but I think with the way that prep went and the circumstances leading up to it, and how inconsistent squats had been feeling, to walk away with 150 on the platform, which is equal to a gym PB, it's 10 kilos over my previous competition best. I cannot complain about that. Like, looking back on squats, I am really proud of myself for making the decisions that I made in the moment and not letting my ego get carried away and just going for the big jumps and going for sticking to the original plan. I coached myself the way that I would coach one of my lifters, and I stayed very objective. So really, really happy with how they went, happy with that 10 kilo PB, and relieved to have got squats out the way because I was a lot more confident about bench and deadlift. So moving on to bench. Bench warm-ups were just so uneventful, honestly. Bench just seems like a random thing that you have to do in between squatting and deadlifting in a powerlifting competition. It just sort of goes by so quickly. It feels so like little hype and little effort compared to the other two. Obviously it's not, but this is probably why I'm not very good at bench press. Bench press warm-ups, uneventful. The plan was to pace for 80 on my third. I really wanted 77.5 on my second, because in the previous comp I did 5 kilo jumps. So I took 75 for my second and then 80, missed 80 on my third. So I finished on 75. So I was like, no, I know 77.5 is going to be there. I've moved it in the gym recently. So let's just take that for a fairly safe second, equal my competition PB on my second, and then go for that 80 on my third. 72.5 was my opener. That moved like an empty bar. 77.5 for my second. Really, really smooth. Really, really happy. When I walked off the platform for that, I was like, yes, 80 is there. Part of me was even like, go 82.5. Like, why not? You've probably got it today. But I didn't. I collected the 2.5 kilos. Me and 80 has been a bit of a meme. It's a bit of a curse with me in competitions. Like when I've gone for it or intended to go for it, things have just gone wrong for whatever reason. So I was very happy to finally bench 80 in a competition. It moved really, really well as well. I am fairly confident that I would have had 82.5 on the day, but I don't regret not going for it. I think 80 was the right choice. One thing about bench that threw me a little bit was that they were using the new soft Alico pad on the bench, which is lovely. It feels like a mattress. The bench I'm used to benching on is very firm and very slippery. So having that soft pad for the first time in a competition, I'm setting up for my opener, I'm like, wow, this feels strange. Like there's no slipping around whatsoever, because your shoulders just sink in to the pad and you're just like stuck in position, and it's very soft and it felt fine. Like it felt good. It was just different. It was different to what I'm used to. Obviously not a problem at all. Like the bench attempts went completely to plan, so can't complain. Very, very happy. And actually that 80 kilo bench third attempt, was my favorite lift of the day. Onwards and upwards with bench. I feel the competition prep block went so well. Like prior to my holiday, the heaviest I'd done in training was 72.5. I then took a week off and rebuilt that, and then got all the way back up to 80 just over the course of that block. I think I found a sweet spot with bench programming. My shoulder is still not perfect, but it's manageable for now, so long as I do all my rehab and so on. So fingers crossed I can maintain that consistency and stay pain-free, so that I can continue to push my bench, because it's the one where I feel that I have the most room for growth. I am furthest away from my genetic potential with bench press. I'm essentially still very much a noob when it comes to bench press, so it's the one where I feel if I can get the programming right, it can really take off. So I'm looking forward to that happening. With the bench out the way, I then had my favorite lift to look forward to. My deadlift has always been incredibly consistent for me in competition. Because I'm not much of a technician, it's probably not something to gloat about, but I'm not much of a technician when it comes to deadlift. I'm very much like, pull it hard and stand up. And this has always worked for me so far. Obviously I very much feel I'm approaching the point where my deadlift will stop progressing unless I dial in the technique. Like this, that's obviously I'm obviously getting there now, but I have never been much of a technician, which means I can really rely on the crowd and the energy and just the excitement and nerves of the competition to be able to lift more than I would in the gym. Essentially, I just respond very well to that competition environment, because I'm not depending on having really nice clean technique, where if something is slightly off then I won't be able to lift it. That's not really the case for me in deadlift. I can kind of muscle through a sticky rep. Having said that, deadlift warm-ups, again, really straightforward, really uneventful. I was feeling very strong in the warm-ups, and I just was like, yeah, I'm in to at least equal my deadlift PB today, and maybe even chip it, which, considering, again, just not that long before I'd not been doing any deadlifting at all really because of my shoulder injury, was a really, really positive place to be in. So opener was 165, and that moved really well. The heaviest I'd done in training prior to the competition was 170, and that was obviously just a little bit over my opener. And 170 had been okay in the gym, not amazing, but okay. But 165 just moved so, it was nice, it was clean, it really set me up well for what I wanted. So I took a 10 kilo jump to 175 for my second. And actually that looked like an opener as well. It's funny, when I watched that back straight after, because I watched that back before making my decision for my third attempt, and I thought, oh yeah, it moved all right, but it was a bit sticky at the top. Like, that's what I thought when I watched it back. But then I came home, had some space, watched it again, and I was like, I actually don't think I've ever moved 175 that fast. It could have been my opener. It moved really, really well, which justified the decision that I made to take another 10 kilo jump. Because at this point, I had already PB'd my total by 7.5 kilos. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm happy with that. That's a decent way to end. But I had my overall goal in mind, which I've not really talked about yet, but that was to qualify for one of the British national qualifiers, basically. So you have regional level, you have national level, and then this year they've just introduced an in-between level, which is the Northern and the Southern Championships. And then there's also the English Championship. So there's kind of those three that I had the option for as my next step. And to get into each one of those, you basically have to be in the top 7 or 8, depending on the competition, applicants. So it's not based on achieving a particular total. It's based on just being one of the best that apply. There is a minimum standard, but it's being one of the best that apply. So I knew it was going to be close for me, and I'm still not sure at the time of recording this whether I did it or not. But I knew that in order to give myself the best shot of getting into one of those competitions, I had to prioritize total, and I couldn't necessarily. This is why I was a bit more conservative on bench as well. I couldn't necessarily go for a big jump on a send it and hope for the best and potentially lose another like 10 kilos. So this is what I was weighing up in my mind after that second attempt deadlift. I was like, I can go 180 was my safe attempt. That was like, if 175 is a bit sticky, we'll go for 180. So that was off the table. So it was either going to be 182.5, which would equal my deadlift PB and give me another 7.5 kilos on my total, or 185, which was going to slightly chip my deadlift PB by 2.5 kilos and obviously give me another 10 on my total. And I just decided, kind of on a spur of the moment, I was like, we'll go for 185. I was thinking, I've already got the 7.5 kilo total BB, so I was on 405, my total at that point. So I've had a great day. I've gone 8 out of 9. I can walk away from that feeling happy and proud. And I think if I go out and pull 182.5 and it moves really easy, I'm just going to be pissed off that I didn't go for that deadlift PB. And again, watching the 175, I was like, yeah, it moved well. I back myself for another 10 kilos. I know that deadlifts show up for me on competition. I know that I'm going to respond well to the vibes in here. And like, I just backed myself. I just had the confidence in my deadlift and it paid off. So 185 deadlift. Again, I did it and I looked, it was fast off the floor. It was sticky at lockout, which is the way that my deadlifts always are, again, because I'm not very technical. I am not very patient off the floor. I just try and move it fast. Sticky at lockout, no issues, 3 white lights. But again, I came off the platform and I was like, oh my God, that was so hard. That was so heavy. That was such a grind. And then I went backstage and my friend Chloe, who was there watching me, came out and she said, oh, that was so easy. And I was like, are you kidding me? That was the hardest deadlift ever. And then I watched the video and I was like, it really wasn't that hard. It didn't look that hard. I'm so thrilled with how that moved. Yeah, it's only 2.5 kilos. It's taken 2.5 years to achieve that, but I've been injured. I've had long breaks from deadlifting to focus on other things and do side quests and whatever. So it's not been a consistent 2.5 years of training deadlift by any stretch of imagination. And so to get another 2.5 kilo PB, add another 10 to my total, and go 9 for 9 and walk away with that, I was absolutely chuffed with that. I was just absolutely chuffed. All in all, a bit of a rocky start with the squat opener, but we won it back. We ended up on 9 out of 9. 10 kilo competition PB on my squat, 2.5 on my bench, 2.5 on my deadlift, 17.5 kilos added to my total. So I ended up on 415 for my total, under 69. And I ended up winning best lifter as well, which was a very nice bonus because it came with a really generous SBD prize package. So I won a belt, some knee sleeves, wrist straps and a t-shirt. All in all, a fantastic day. I really can't have asked for any more for myself. I thought in my head, if I have a really, really good day, I will get like high 14s for my total, which would have been like 417.5, basically, maybe 420. If I have the day I'm expecting, it will be between 402 and 410. So I sort of landed in the middle of there, 415. Really, really good day. Did everything I could. I think I maximised my total on the day, to be honest. What's next? I will put my application in for the qualifiers. 415 at the time of recording this is enough to get me in, but obviously there are several weeks still before applications close, so anything could happen between now and then. I'm not counting my chickens because I know there are some very, very strong under 69 kilo lifters out there in the UK that will most likely want to do this competition as well. So that is the plan A, is to do one of those in the summer. Plan B, if that doesn't work out, will be to do another regional competition towards the end of the year, just to give me something to aim for. I still think if I can have just a few blocks of consistent training with no injuries, I have a lot of gains to be made on my total. I'm still wanting to compete again this year. If it's not in the summer at one of those national qualifiers, it will be towards the end of the year, autumn, winter, in another regional. that's the short-term plan. I am not planning to go off on any side quests. Anyone who knows me will know that although powerlifting has kind of always been the main quest, I have gone on many side quests. I spent a good 2.5 years learning Olympic weightlifting. Didn't really do any powerlifting in that time other than sort of some squatting, which you have to sort of do to learn Olympic lifting. I also did jiu-jitsu for 2.5 years, which really meant that powerlifting had to take a back seat. I did some bodybuilding for pretty much the first 6 months of 2024. I was just purely focused on aesthetics, and I did a big cut and got super jacked, but not very strong. And then I've just made the return to powerlifting at the end of last year. So yeah, I think if I can just stick to a consistent routine with it, keep injuries at bay, and just not go off on any side missions, I have a lot more in me to give. So I'm looking forward to an opportunity to express that this year or next year or whenever that might be. That's the plan. The next block has been written. I will be starting it tomorrow. So I'm really looking forward to taking everything I've learned from this prep and applying it to future preps, because it's only going to get better from here. So yeah, that's everything about my competition day. I really couldn't have asked for a better day. Thank you. The support really does mean a lot. All my clients, obviously, most of them were watching me and who were like just cheering me on via the live stream. It was just absolutely lovely to get all your messages. I feel very proud to have been able to represent the team and represent the brand. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, because I'm hoping there will be more videos of my powerlifting journey, some of my clients' powerlifting journey, some informative content about strength training to the channel very soon. So keep your eyes peeled.